I want to thank you all for giving up some of your noon hour for this. I understand and realize that this sort of seemed to happen quite quickly. We've been talking about strategic planning for quite some time at the college, probably since I arrived almost a year ago. But one way or another, things get in the way, and we're launching it now. I think this is a good time to be launching it now on the heels of the university strategic renewal process. It's also a very important time in the university's cycle of events, because we have a number of different things happening in the next year or so. The university as a whole needs to come up with a strategic mandate agreement, which is its agreement with the province, which is really going to dictate where our university fits in the ecosystem of universities in Ontario, and will be used very much to justify different ways in which we might want to expand or grow or develop in different directions. And so our strategies and our actions and our goals as a college need to be represented in that strategic mandate agreement. And that's the negotiation around that is, well, it really began today. This morning I had a meeting, the deans of the different colleges met with Charlotte this morning, and we really launched that discussion. So it's very topical and timely. We also have a number of different things happening at the provincial and federal level, which I'll go into in a few minutes, that really make a perfect storm of possibilities and perhaps opportunities, and also some potential threats. So we're really wanting to get going on this, and we've given ourselves a fairly tight timeline. So we're really looking at a strategic plan for the next 5 years, and very much what we're going to be thinking about as we're going through this process is, what would we like OVC to look like in 5 years? What is the vision we have for our college? What's going to be different about OVC 5 years from now if we look back and say, what have we achieved? So I think we have a shared vision. I think we all come to work every day really wanting our place of work and our community of researchers, teachers, students to be the best that we can be. I think we are a leading college of veterinary medicine. I think we have some reason to believe that's true, but we all can look at things that we do every day and say, well, things can be improved. Plus, it's a very rapidly changing environment that we are in right now, and we need to be prepared and look forward to the future horizons to see how we can position ourselves to continue to be a leading college of veterinary medicine. We didn't get there by accident, though. When I look back, and of course when I interviewed here, I did look back at a number of different documents, including the last two strategic plans and economic impact report, master plan. There's been so much work, so much purposeful work done to get the Ontario Veterinary College where it is today. Sure, things do happen by accident. Opportunities do arise that we either take advantage of or perhaps miss out on. But a lot of what's been achieved has been achieved because people like ourselves have sat down and said, envisioned what the college could be. So those of us that are as old as me, sometimes when the topic of strategic planning comes up, there's a bit of eye rolling going on. And that's because we've been through many. They are very time consuming, and in some cases, unfortunately, usually those of 10 to 20 years ago, they often ended up with a bunch of platitudes that didn't really result in a lot of action. I'd like to say that this strategic planning process is going to be different, not just because we're approaching it differently, but because it has to be different. We need to have hard actions and goals that we're going to pursue. And I'd like to congratulate you all, at least those of you that have been here for a while, in having strategic plans or integrated plans from the last 10 years that have really resulted in hard actions. So you might say, well, strategic planning, why should I bother? It hasn't really done anything for me in the past. Well, I'd like to disagree with you on that. When I look back at the strategic plan or the integrated plan from 2012 or back 10 years ago, it's amazing how many of the important actions and goals that were contained in that plan have actually come to fruition. Some of them happened very quickly in terms of maybe curricular change and development of different research specialties and areas. Others have taken a long time to come to fruition, like the neuroscience major for the university that's just been announced recently. That's been proposed. That's been over 10 years in gestation. But still, it's because we had that plan, And we as a college bought into that plan, that we now have a success like that, which is now going to increase enrollment, but more importantly, draw resources into our college that are really going to allow us to expand areas of expertise that we feel we have a rightful place to be leaders in. So I would say, I would assure you, I guess, and give you some confidence that this strategic planning process is going to be just as effective as your ones from the last 2 times, which I believe have been extremely effective in positioning OVC where it is today. So another part of the eye rolling is, oh well, we're just getting another strategic plan because the old one is running out. Well, that's true to some degree. It will run out next year. Also, oh, it's a new dean, and all deans, do strategic plans because that's what new deans do. In a way, partially to make up for their ignorance of what's happening in their college. They have to figure out what's going on and what people really want to be doing. Well, that's true partially, but that's not the reason. So I'll quote or paraphrase our Prime Minister and say it's because it's 2016. Now, that's something else that causes eye rolling. Everybody says, oh, well, it's a great period of change. And you'll talk, I've talked to previous deans, and they'll say, oh, well, it was always a period of change, which is true. But things really are changing a lot. As I alluded to right at the start, we're at a time of, it's a bit of a nexus in terms of how we as a society are viewing higher education in general, and more specifically, it's a bit of a nexus about how society and we ourselves look at our profession and the role of research and science and fundamental science. All these things are kind of up for grabs at the moment. So, as I mentioned, there's all sorts of reviews going on right now. We have a review of how the province of Ontario is going to fund its universities going into the next decade. We don't really know what that's going to look like, but we can be sure that it's going to be more performance-based than it ever has been before, because that's kind of the Kool-Aid that everyone is drinking right now. So we better be prepared to have key performance metrics that we can measure ourselves on and our success on, that we both feel are reasonable and ones that we can do well on. So that's going to be part of this process. There's a national review of fundamental science and how that's funding at the federal level. So that could well impact a lot of us here and in the work that we do. And we also have to be prepared to try and influence that in any way that we can. We're also up for renegotiation of the OMAF agreement. So very important to the university and extremely important to this college. Once again, every time this comes up for renegotiation, we're in a slightly different environment with a slightly different set of political priorities and oftentimes very different people sitting around the table. Once again, we need to be able to be prepared to say what we want out of that agreement, because it's a two-way agreement, right? And what we can deliver and what we can do well and what will support us in our goals, and make sure that it maps over to what the university wants and of course what the provincial government wants as well. So there's these shifting attitudes, there's shifting roles. I think I've really been impressed since I've been in Ontario. I noticed it before, but to a greater degree here, I see many of our graduates that have gone into really what would be considered previously non-traditional veterinary roles in public service, in agencies, in corporations, in companies. Really interesting and fascinating careers that people have taken. But what is different, and I've noticed this since I've been here, is that now I'm getting discourse with the students as they come into our program, looking for information, ways, career paths, really more purposeful and obvious ways to direct themselves into these alternative career paths. Maybe not immediately after graduation, sometimes immediately, but oftentimes to make sure that they have a transition into those alternative career paths. And I'm really glad to see that, and it's kind of pushing us a little bit to think about what we do here at OVC and make sure that we're doing everything we can to prepare our graduates, not for the roles that are going to be available even in 2 or 3 years, but right through the next couple of decades, because that's going to be their careers. And I think there's a difference in the way, the needs, it's a different things that society are asking of us. We've been beating our heads against the wall seemingly for decades about the breadth of education and understanding that the veterinary degree brings to society. Now we're getting an appreciation for the skills that our population-based problem-solving skills that we bring to any problem that we deal with. And now we're starting to get that pushback or pull in a way that folks are expecting different things from our profession, and we need to deliver them. So what does strategic planning look like? Well, in a general sense, we can divide it into sort of these steps, and this is what we're going to be engaged in between last week when it started and approximately the end of January when we hope to have our plan in place. So when we break it down, the mission is what we do. Why do we exist? Now we have a mission statement, we have a vision, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with them at the moment, but they bear examination again because they've probably been in place for a while. Who do we do these things for? And what values do we bring along with them when we do the things that we do? And who are the beneficiaries of what we do? Another way of looking at the values is that when we think about ourselves and think back to the last year, the last 5 years, what are the things that we feel like we've done particularly well, we're particularly good at, or that have been particularly successful, and think about the values that have informed those things and why we feel good about them, then that's a way of saying, well, what are the values of our institution or organization? So we'll have a little opportunity to sort of feed into that. Those of you that are involved in strategic planning will have experienced a SWOT analysis. So that's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So the strengths and weaknesses are very much a snapshot of our current situation. What are we good at? What gaps do we need to fill? Where are our weak spots? The opportunities and threats are forward-looking. So that's looking into the crystal ball and saying what's coming down the horizon that's going to influence us and what opportunities might there be that are going to allow us to reposition ourselves and do things better or be better prepared for some of the threats that are coming down the tube at us, and we've talked about some of those. At some point during this process, we need to come up with that vision. Visions can be very ethereal, but in this case, it's going to be quite practical. It's going to be around what I said before. What will OVC look like in 5 years' time that's different from what it looks like now? So it's going to be a more practical vision for change. And hopefully when we've gone through the SWOT analysis, we will have given ourselves the requisite urgency to realize that there are some things that we need to change or improve or enhance or expand. And God forbid, there might be things we have to actually let go of as well. And that can happen as well. That can be a hard one to do. The outcome of this process will be what our facilitator calls critical strategic issues. So these are, and if I have any criticism of previous strategic plans or integrated plans, oftentimes there's just too many strategic issues being put forward. And if you have too many, sometimes they get lost, and you feel like you're spreading your energies over too many different issues. So our facilitator, who I'll introduce on the next slide, I think, has suggested that probably 6 would be a good number. So probably between 5 and 6 and 7, somewhere in that range. These are kind of fairly broad stroke critical things that we feel like we need to work on. They're not going to be at the sort of action level, they're not going to be at the problem solving level, but just broadly, what are the parts about our mission that we feel like we need to work on over the next 5 years to be particularly effective? And then we have a chance to get down into the actions. What are the actions and specific goals underneath there that will be needed to be achieved? Who will do them? When will they do them? With what resources will they be accomplished? So that's the stuff that we tend to like to get into because we can see the result. But you have to have that framework, that critical strategic issue framework, to make sure that the actions you're working on really are the ones that we actually said are important. And then finally, there's no point in having goals unless you can implement them. And of course, and this is something that I think strategic plans often fail on, is that once the strategic planning process is done, the document is produced, unfortunately no one is given responsibility to actually implement these things, and there often is not, the people that were involved in the plan oftentimes have not done a particularly good job in communicating, nor in monitoring what's happening in the year or so afterwards, and things just gather dust and things don't get done. So we're really going to avoid that this time. and really utilize our facilitator. I thought I had a slide here for him, but it doesn't seem to have come up. I must have hidden it. Our facilitator is Daniel Stone. We just all met him for the first time physically anyway last week in Dean's Council and Dean's Advisory Committee. Daniel is an extremely experienced facilitator who's worked with, he said, about half the veterinary colleges in the United States up to this point. So he's very familiar with the veterinary world. It wasn't intentional that he's engaged with the veterinary world, but he just seems to have, as this often happens, you get a bit of a reputation for being effective. And also his manner and his approach seems to really sort of fit with the culture of organizations like veterinary colleges, and he's worked with FDA and AVMA and a lot of the organizations that we have a lot to do with. So he has a very strong feel for our mission. And what we like to say are our values. So I think we're very comfortable with him so far, and I think he's going to do a great job. Plus, he's going to hold us. He's going to not allow us to do one of those strategic plans that ends up with rather bland, apple pie kind of statements and no real hard actions. And he's not going to allow us to not come up with an implementation plan. So as a new dean, I think that's good for me to have that kind of guidance. So getting down to the actual timeline of how things are happening, what we're engaged in now is sort of the initial engagement. As of today, I think, if not before, there will be a survey released to be filled in by everyone and anyone who wants to do it, who can do it. We really want a very broad swathe of both internal stakeholders and external stakeholders to fill out this survey. It's not going to be a particularly long survey, nor a difficult one to fill in, but it's going to ask many of the questions that are the logical questions to ask in a typical SWOT analysis. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and also some opportunity for people to wax poetic if they want and come up with some sort of free text ideas of things that they'd like to see achieved in any particular strategic plan. So the timelines for that are relatively short. Then we're going to have a retreat on October 11th and 12th, and we're in the process of identifying individuals through the department chairs, directors, and others to, people mostly who can devote a day or a day and a half of their time to this, which is a very difficult thing to ask someone to do at this stage of the semester, but we're asking anyway. There will be an interim period where there's a lot of analysis and working groups that go to working on the actual actions that have come out of the first retreat, and then another retreat later on in December or January when we're getting close to the point where we're starting to sort of build the bones around our strategic plan. And we'll be at that retreat talking about how these actions will be implemented. We hope to have a finalized action plan by the end of January 2017. The reason I've chosen that date, it seems reasonable, but it's also a date at which the university is asking me to come up with our fundraising priorities for the college. So I think there's a little bit of a match-up there. And the implementation will be ongoing over the next 5 years. Oh, there's Daniel. So he's got a website there. If you want to check out his biography and what he does, feel free to go ahead and do that. This presentation will be posted. We do have a page that Scott has set up for us. It's just around OVC strategic planning. It will have this presentation, it will have the link to the survey, and it will have supporting documents such as our previous strategic plans, which I encourage you to look at because they're quite elucidating. I know it's been a while since any of you have looked at them, and some other information around strategic planning in general and how to make it effective. So as I said last week, and today we're having our initial engagement, which was a Dean's Council, Dean's Advisory Committee meeting with our facilitator, talking about an approach to how strategic planning will roll out at OVC, and the survey is out and live now. That's correct, right? So it's accessible. I'll give you the links here in a minute. The retreat that we scheduled, it might seem like it's very soon, and it is, but when we really looked at dates and a bunch of constraints, this was the date that worked for us. October 11th is the day after Thanksgiving holiday and is not a day of classes. So that's one of the reasons why we identified that date as being essential. And then a bunch of other things indicated that it really was one of the few dates that really would work. So we're going to, during that period, have a day and a half of very intense group work to try and come up and fill in the blanks for these things that I mentioned, the mission and the SWOT and the vision. We're going to invite, just logistically, we feel like we have to limit ourselves to about 40 people because of the group work that we're planning. If it gets too large, it just gets too unwieldy, and we don't, we think we're not going to be very effective. But we are going to try and have a very good representation of what we would call both our internal stakeholders and our external stakeholders. So we're busy at the moment trying to identify folks that have the time to come help us from amongst these people here and also external stakeholders. And this is not a complete list by any means, but it gives you an idea of the breadth that we're thinking of. And we're kind of hoping for a balance of about 2/3 internal and 1/3 external. I'm not sure exactly where it will fall out, but that's my sort of gut feeling and the gut feeling of Daniel and others around Dean's Council and Dean's Advisory Committee, that the external stakeholders are valuable to us. We spend a lot of time talking to each other. Sometimes it's good to benchmark ourselves against the people that we do this for, right? This is all part of our mission, right? Who do we do it for? Who are the beneficiaries of what we do? We better check in with them now and then and just make sure that they don't have some ideas on things that we could be doing better and to serve their needs and society's needs. So we'll have that interim period, and then we'll come back at a date to be determined for retreat number 2. So people are curious, well, another source of eye rolling to do with strategic plans is that when you do strategic plans, especially when they're done in a period of crisis or difficulty, you often get to the end of them, you've got some great ideas, but you have zero resources to put them into action. So you're given that kind of not a very good option of saying, well, what are you going to give up so you can do these other good ideas? Well, there might be a little bit of that at the end of the strategic plan, but we are fortunate that we do have resources at the moment within the college and the university to apply to good ideas that come forward. I think this is going to be a positive experience. We don't have the resources to do every good idea every day, every week, and I have people coming to me with fantastic ideas. You just can't say yes to all of them. So how will we do that? Well, once we have the framework, the strategic plan will not have actual hard costed proposals. It will have general goals that we want to pursue. Following that, with our framework of our strategic plan, we can then look for specific proposals that are well thought out, well designed, broad consultation, and of course have the appropriate costings associated with them. So that can go forward to Dean's Council for funds that we have available. It can go forward to the university for incremental funding. It could go to external funding agencies. There's a number of different ways we can look for donors to help support us. What resources do we have? Well, more than you think. As you know, there was an announcement some time ago that the third year of MYP budget cuts that the entire university was asked to undergo were forgiven because of the strong enrollment numbers that the University of Guelph has experienced in the last couple of years. And again, this September it's been the same again. So those cuts largely for a lot of sections had been made or were very close to being made. So in a way that those funds are available to us to reinvest. And we're kind of calling it the Strategic Reinvestment Fund or something like that. And there will be a significant amount of funding going forward, and it is base funding because that is base funding that was initially taken away from us and now returned to the coffers that we can reinvest. It won't be enough to address all of our strategic goals, but it certainly will be a great start, and it's nice to have that available to us. Some departments have significant carry forward or contingency money. They're already developing plans around that. So together with the base funding associated with the strategic investment money, that kind of carry forward money can be very useful for bridging or supplementary support of those initiatives. We have retirements happening every year, and that's always an opportunity to align or realign things that we do. So those opportunities are there. We have the expectation that there will be future requests, and in fact there is really no deadline. We can put forward incremental funding requests to the Provost anytime that we feel like we have proposals that are strong and are ready to go. And when I say strong, they're going to be built around, they need to be built around our strategic plan. They need to be built around our plan, they need to dovetail with the university's plan, and they need to be able to be supported by the strategic mandate agreement, which luckily for us at this veterinary college, or this college on campus, we have very little trouble justifying what we do here, because what we do here is very much the centerpiece of our strategic mandate agreement, which is very much about what makes University of Guelph special. Well, we're certainly one of the important things that makes this university special, having the only veterinary college here and having a very special position around translational research and a very special position around what we would generally call One Health. Really no one else is in a position to do that. So there's not too many things we can suggest and bring forward that are not going to fit into that strategic mandate agreement, so long as we make sure that it's well crafted and permits that. I mentioned to you that the university is looking for broad stroke fundraising priorities for us to take forward to the university at that level, and so I think once again they're thinking, rather than pursuing 100 different things all the time a little bit, let's try and concentrate on a few larger things. I think I was sort of told or intimated from what I heard that the University of Guelph really is not going to go into a fundraising campaign as such, but it is sort of constantly in a campaign. So they want those kind of large strategic objectives of out there, so that their fundraisers, our fundraisers, can go and pursue them. You've had the experience this year of grad growth money being devolved back to the departments, and I'm hoping to have a bit of a debrief on that in the next month or so to find out how the departments have found that useful for growing the grad programs both in quality and quantity, but we expect that sort of system to continue. We're having an interest in a little bit of expansion and distance education from this college, and that brings in revenue also. Thanks to everyone in the hospital and Dr. Nykamp's leadership, the hospital's been in a very strong position over the last couple of years, and that has certainly, gives the potential for reinvestment of monies there as well, and that's been happening already. And then we have our various strategic partnerships, such as industry research chairs that can help us deliver on some of the goals that we have. There's many possibilities there. So the most important take-home message is get involved in this process, because at the end of the day, when we come forward to invest our precious resources that we have here at the college, decisions on that is going to be very much based upon what's in this plan. Not exclusively. We understand that things change. We understand that new opportunities arise. Even within a 5-year period, things can change very quickly. But certainly we will be always checking back against the actions that we said we would do and trying to see any new proposals through that light. So these are our next steps. I really encourage all of you to take some time to fill out the survey. We've got a fairly tight timeline because Daniel, our facilitator, is going to have to analyze the information that comes in, and by its nature, it's not particularly like closed questions. It's fairly open to allow a real strong interplay of ideas coming forward. So that does present an analytic issue for him to come up with strong themes out of it. But he's used to doing this, and this is what he will do. But we just need to get the results back in his hands as quickly as we can. Everything that you need to know, or all the supporting documents, are at this website, Strategic Planning. and including this presentation. If you want to have, rather than having digital interaction with the process, if you want to talk specifically to people that you are sure are going to be engaged right throughout the whole process, that would be members of Dean's Council, your department chair. Those folks, you can bend their ear for a little while too, and just sort of reinforce some of the things that I'm hoping that you'll have in your survey response as well. And when the analysis of the survey results is complete, it will be posted to the website as well. So people can sort of get a bit of a feel for what their colleagues are saying and the sort of themes that are arising out of this. So I think it's going to be really useful. And even beyond the strategic plan, I think there's going to be useful information that comes out of this survey process that's going to inform what we do every day. And if within departments, within sections, within units, within the college, I suspect there'll be many strategic planning or visioning sessions going on. I hope that that's going to happen. I will encourage each of your working groups, wherever you work, to have a sit down, and maybe not as formal a strategic planning process as what we're proposing here, but talk amongst yourselves. That's what this is for. And then after talking amongst yourselves, then we will all talk amongst ourselves to bring our ideas forward. So that's that. Didn't take too long, hopefully, so lots of time for some questions if people have any questions around the process or anything else.